The morphine haze cleared just enough to see the empty bassinet. My mother-in-law held the discharge papers, signed by my husband. The security guard blocked the nursery door, his hand on my shoulder. I had one weapon, the IV pole. My daughter was being moved to a private wing. If I didn't stop them now, I'd lose her forever. The file in my hand proved I was never unfit. But David had already packed my things. The guest house wasn't a retreat, it was a cage, and my baby was slipping away. The sterile scent of bleach stung Sarah's nostrils as she drifted toward consciousness. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, vibrating against her skull. On the bedside table, a thick stack of legal bond papers sat beneath David's heavy, looping signature. The ink looked wet, a dark blue vein of betrayal against the stark white page. Sarah tried to sit up, but her limbs felt like they were filled with wet sand, a heavy, chemical lethargy pinning her to the thin hospital mattress. "The ink is dry, Sarah. Go to sleep," Evelyn murmured. She smoothed her silk skirt, the fabric rustling like dry leaves in a graveyard. She didn't meet Sarah's eyes. Instead, she adjusted her gold watch, her movements precise and surgical. The pediatrician agreed. The nursery at the estate is ready. David understands that a stable environment outweighs this. Evelyn gestured toward the IV bag, dripping clear poison into Sarah's vein. Sarah's tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth, dry and metallic. She reached for the documents, but her fingers grazed only cold laminate. Across the room, a nurse hovered near the bassinet, swaddling the infant in a tight, white cocoon. Sarah's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4. She needed a count. She needed to anchor the world. "You didn't ask me," Sarah croaked. Her throat burned as if she'd swallowed lye. "David is the father. He signed. It's done." Evelyn stepped toward the door, her heels clicking a rhythmic, final cadence against the linoleum. "Rest. We'll bring photos once you're coherent." Sarah gripped the chrome bedrail. The metal bit into her palm, cold and unforgiving. Outside the glass partition, David stood with his head bowed, his shoulders slumped under his mother's shadow. He wouldn't glance toward the bed. The realization coiled in Sarah's gut, a heavy, leaden weight. They weren't protecting the baby. They were erasing the mother. She watched Evelyn signal the transport team, her mother-in-law's smile thin and sharp as a razor blade. Sarah swung her legs over the edge, the floor tiles shocking her bare skin. She had to move before the doors locked. The room felt like it was spinning, a carousel of white walls and chrome fixtures. Sarah's feet hit the floor with a dull thud. She counted the tiles as she stood. 1, 2, 3, 4. If she could just reach the door, she could stop the wheels from turning. But the hallway was a blur of motion. She saw the bassinet being wheeled away, the small, swaddled shape of Maya disappearing behind a pair of swinging double doors. "Wait!" Sarah's voice was a ragged whisper. She lunged for the door, but her knees buckled. The IV pole rattled, the metal clanging like a funeral bell. She caught herself on the doorframe, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. A security guard appeared in the hallway, his face a mask of indifferent professional duty. He was a wall of blue polyester and brass buttons, blocking the only exit. "Ma'am, you need to stay in bed," the guard said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of empathy. "My daughter," Sarah panted, her fingers trembling against the wood grain of the door. "They're taking my daughter." "The paperwork is in order, ma'am. Please step back." Sarah looked at the IV pole. It was a slender spear of aluminum, topped with the bag of clear fluid that was keeping her tethered to this nightmare. With a surge of adrenaline that cut through the morphine fog, she shoved the pole forward. The base wedged firmly into the gap between the door and the frame, a silver tooth biting into the wood. The guard startled, his hand flying to his belt, but the door remained jammed open. Sarah didn't wait. She ducked under his arm, her hospital gown fluttering like a white flag of surrender she refused to wave. The corridor was a tunnel of blinding light and the sound of her own frantic pulse. She ignored the sting in her arm where the needle pulled at her skin. She had to find the nursery. She had to find Maria. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a cart of laundry. The smell of industrial detergent was overwhelming. From the shadows of a supply closet, a hand reached out and snagged her arm. Sarah gasped, ready to fight, but she met the tired, bloodshot eyes of Maria Garcia. The nurse's scrubs were wrinkled, and her stethoscope hung like a leaden weight around her neck. "Sarah, stop," Maria whispered, her voice urgent. She pulled Sarah into the small, darkened room. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and stale coffee. "They've already moved her." Evelyn had a private ambulance waiting at the service entrance. "Where?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Where are they taking her?" "To the Mitchell estate." "But Sarah, listen to me." Maria's hands were shaking as she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a thick manila folder. "I saw what they did. I saw the doctors sign those discharge papers without even looking at your chart. Evelyn paid for that signature. This is your medical file, the real one. It shows you were stable, alert, and fully capable of care. They tried to delete the digital records, but I printed the physical copies before the system updated." Sarah took the folder, the paper feeling heavy and significant in her hands. It was a weapon, a shield of facts against Evelyn's manufactured fiction. "Thank you, Maria. Why are you doing this?" Maria looked away, her jaw tightening. "Because I've seen this happen before. My sister, they took her boy because she couldn't afford a lawyer to tell the truth. I won't let them do it to you. Now go. There's a side exit through the cafeteria. The security guards are all watching the main elevators." Sarah clutched the file to her chest. She counted the steps to the exit. 1, 2, 3. Her mind already racing toward the suburban cul-de-sac. She had to get home. She had to find David. If she could just talk to him without Evelyn whispering in his ear, maybe she could wake him up from this nightmare. The drive to their house in the suburbs was a blur of gray asphalt and neon signs. Sarah's car felt like a cage, the GPS screen glowing with a cold, blue light. When she pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. The manicured lawn, the identical mailbox, the perfect white shutters. But the silence was wrong. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that suggested a vacuum. She fumbled with her keys at the front door. The lock turned, but the house felt empty. The air was stale, the scent of her own perfume replaced by the sharp, clinical smell of Evelyn's presence. "David?" she called out. Her voice echoed off the hardwood floors. She walked toward the master bedroom, her heart skipping a beat. The door was open. She stopped at the threshold and gasped. The room was stripped. Her clothes, her jewelry, her books. Everything was gone. The bed was made with military precision, the pillows fluffed and cold. "We thought it would be easier this way," a voice said from the hallway. Sarah whirled around. David was standing there, his posture slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked like a ghost in his own home. "Easier?" Sarah's voice rose, a sharp edge of hysteria creeping in. "You moved my things, David. You moved me out of our bedroom while I was in the hospital? Mother said. She said you needed space to recover. The guest house at the estate is quiet. It's better for your nerves, Sarah. We both agreed. We? There is no we, David. There is only your mother. Sarah stepped toward him, her hands clenched into fists. Where is Maya? Tell me right now. She's at the estate. She's safe. She has a full-time nurse, Sarah. A professional. Not like... He trailed off, his eyes darting toward the exit sign in the hallway. Not like me. Sarah's voice was a low, dangerous growl. I am her mother. You signed her away like she was a piece of property. You're helping her, David. You're helping her steal our daughter. We're just trying to do what's best for the family, David whispered, his voice cracking. He reached out as if to touch her arm, but Sarah flinched away. The realization hit her like a physical blow. David wasn't a victim of his mother's manipulation. He was an architect of it. He had traded his wife's sanity for his mother's approval. He had chosen the Mitchell legacy over the woman he claimed to love. Sarah turned and ran. She didn't look back at the house that was no longer hers. She didn't look at the man who was no longer her husband. She counted the steps to her car, 1, 2, 3, 4, and drove toward the Mitchell estate. The medical file clutched tightly in the passenger seat. The Mitchell estate loomed out of the darkness like a Gothic fortress. The wrought iron gates were shut tight, the gold M gleaming in the moonlight. Sarah pulled up to the intercom, her thumb hovering over the button. "Let me in," she demanded, when a voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mrs. Mitchell is not receiving visitors," the voice replied. It was Robert Miller, the head of security. Sarah recognized the flat, Midwestern cadence of his voice. "I'm not a visitor. I live here. My daughter is inside." "The orders are clear, Sarah. You aren't permitted on the grounds without a legal escort. Please move your vehicle, or I'll be forced to call the local authorities." Sarah didn't move. She stared at the gates, the metal bars looking like the ribs of a giant beast. She wasn't going to be turned away. She drove her car onto the shoulder, the tires crunching over the gravel. She stepped out into the damp night air, the smell of wet earth and pine needles filling her lungs. She found a section of the perimeter wall where the ivy grew thick and tangled. She began to climb, her fingers digging into the brickwork. The rough stone tore at her palms, but she didn't feel the pain. She was halfway up when a low, guttural growl vibrated through the air. She froze. 2 glowing amber eyes appeared in the darkness below. A German shepherd, its teeth bared, stood at the base of the wall. Beside it, Robert Miller stepped into the light of his flashlight, the beam cutting through the mist. "I told you to leave, Sarah," Robert said. He checked his tactical watch, the movement precise. "You're trespassing. If I let this dog go, I can't guarantee what happens next. Get down, now." Sarah looked at the dog, then at the house glowing in the distance. She could hear a faint, rhythmic humming, a sound that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was Maya. She could feel it in her bones, but the wall was too high, and the dog was too close. She climbed down, her movements slow and defeated. Robert watched her until she was back in her car. As she drove toward the guest house, the gilded cage Evelyn had prepared for her, she felt the walls closing in. Inside the guest house, the air was cold and smelled of lemon polish. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. She reached for her phone to call her lawyer, but the screen remained black. She tried to plug it into the charger, but nothing happened. The device was dead, wiped remotely through the family's shared account. She ran to her car, hoping to use the GPS to find a way out. But the screen displayed a single, chilling message. Service disabled. She was trapped. No phone, no car, no way to reach the world. She walked into the small kitchen, her hands shaking. She needed a plan. She needed a voice of reason. She saw the landline sitting on the counter, a heavy, beige plastic relic. She picked up the receiver and dialed the number for her attorney, Samuel Sterling. He had been her father's friend. He would help. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. Sterling and Associates, how may I direct your call? It's Sarah Mitchell. I need to speak with Samuel immediately. It's an emergency. One moment, Mrs. Mitchell. Sarah held her breath. She could hear the faint sound of typing in the background. She felt a surge of hope. Samuel was a shark. He would have an injunction filed by morning. He would get her Maya back. She closed her eyes, imagining the look on Evelyn's face when the sheriff arrived at the gates. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell, the receptionist said, her voice turning professional and cool. I see a note here in our system. It appears that Evelyn Mitchell has placed our firm on a comprehensive retainer for the upcoming fiscal year. As of 20 minutes ago, we are representing the Mitchell family estate in all domestic and corporate matters. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. What? No. Samuel is my friend. He's my lawyer. I'm afraid there is a significant conflict of interest, ma'am. Mr. Sterling has been instructed to refer all your inquiries to the Mitchell family's primary counsel. We can no longer represent you in any capacity. Have a pleasant evening. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the receiver, the dial tone a mocking, rhythmic drone in her ear. She had been outplayed. Evelyn hadn't just taken her baby. She had bought the very ground Sarah stood on. Every exit was blocked, every ally purchased. She slumped against the counter, the cold laminate biting into her skin. The silence of the guest house was absolute, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4. She began to count, her voice a ragged whisper in the dark. She had to find a way. She had to be unbreakable. Because if she broke now, Maya would grow up in a house of stone, raised by a woman who collected sugar packets like trophies and a man who had forgotten how to say, I. Sarah stood up, her jaw set. She wasn't a guest. She was a mother. And she was going to burn this house down if she had to, just to hear her daughter's heartbeat again. The night deepened, the shadows in the guest house stretching like long, dark fingers across the floor. Sarah paced the small living room, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. She couldn't stay here. The air felt thin, as if Evelyn were slowly pumping the oxygen out of the room. She heard a sound, a low metallic click. She froze. It came from the kitchen. She crept toward the doorway, her heart hammering. On the counter, a small plastic device was glowing with a soft, green light. It was a baby monitor, the kind with a video screen and a sensitive microphone. Evelyn must have left it there, a cruel reminder of what Sarah was missing. Sarah picked it up, her fingers trembling. The screen was grainy, showing a dimly lit room with floral wallpaper and a large white sunroom window. In the center of the frame was a bassinet. And then she heard it, a low, rhythmic vibration. It wasn't a cry, but a haunting melodic hum that seemed to vibrate in Sarah's own chest. It was the sound Maya made when she was anxious, the sound of a soul in mourning. I'm coming, Maya, Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. I'm coming. She knew that sunroom. It was on the south side of the main house, overlooking the rose garden. She grabbed a heavy brass bird figurine from the bookshelf. a decorative weight that felt solid and lethal in her hand. She slipped out the back door of the guest house, staying low to the ground. The grass was slick with dew, the cold soaking into her socks. She counted the paces to the main house. 1, 2, 3, 56. She reached the glass wall of the sunroom. Inside, she could see the faint glow of the monitor's light reflecting off the white wicker furniture. She didn't hesitate. She swung the brass bird with all her might. The glass shattered with a violent, crystalline shriek. The sound seemed to echo for miles, a jagged tear in the suburban silence. An alarm began to wail, a high-pitched, rhythmic scream that vibrated through the floorboards. Sarah didn't care. She climbed through the jagged opening, the glass slicing into her palm. She didn't feel it. She scrambled across the floor, her eyes fixed on the bassinet. "Sarah, stop!" A voice boomed from the doorway. It was Evelyn. She was standing at the top of the grand staircase, her silver hair perfectly in place even in the middle of the night. She looked down at Sarah with a mix of disgust and cold triumph. "You've finally lost it, haven't you?" Evelyn said, her voice projecting over the roar of the alarm. "Breaking and entering. Vandalism. You're proving everything I told the judge." Sarah ignored her. She reached the bassinet and scooped Maya into her arms. The baby was warm, her skin smelling of milk and expensive soap. Maya's humming stopped instantly, replaced by a soft, shaky breath. "I'm taking her, Evelyn," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I have my medical file. I have proof of what you did at the hospital." "You have nothing but a criminal record in the making," Evelyn snapped. She began to descend the stairs, her silk robe fluttering behind her. "Give me the child, Sarah. Don't make this worse for yourself." They met on the landing, a wide expanse of polished mahogany. Sarah held Maya tight against her chest, her back to the railing. "You're a monster," Sarah said, her eyes boring into Evelyn's. "You think money can buy a soul? You think you can just erase me?" Evelyn leaned in, her face inches from Sarah's. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. "I don't think, Sarah. I know. I've spent 60 years building this family. I won't let a clumsy, unstable girl ruin it because she thinks she's special." Evelyn's hand shot out, grabbing Sarah's shoulder. With a sudden, violent shove, she pushed Sarah toward the edge of the stairs. "Oops," Evelyn whispered, her eyes wide and dark. Another accident. Sarah felt her foot slip. The world tilted. The stairs yawned below her like a wooden throat. She felt the air rush past her ears. But as she fell, her hand shot out and gripped the banister. The wood groaned under her weight. She swung her body back, her muscles screaming, and slammed into the wall. She was gasping for air, her heart trying to burst through her ribs. Maya was crying now, a sharp, piercing wail that filled the house. "You tried to kill me," Sarah panted, her eyes wide with shock. "You actually tried to kill me." "I tried to protect my legacy," Evelyn screamed, her composure finally breaking. The rattle of the snake was gone, replaced by a raw, jagged fury. "You're nothing. You're a footnote. You're a mistake David made, and I'm going to fix it." Sarah pulled herself up, her fingers digging into the mahogany. She looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, and saw the terrified girl who had been evicted at 16. She saw the poverty and the fear that had been curdled into a weapon. "You're not fixing anything, Evelyn," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. "You're just repeating the cycle, and it ends tonight." The front doors burst open. Blue and red lights strobed against the walls, casting long, rhythmic shadows. David ran in, followed by 2 police officers, James Anderson and his partner. "There she is," David shouted, pointing at Sarah. His voice was high and thin, cracking with desperation. "She broke in. She's got the baby. She's dangerous." Officer Anderson stepped forward, his hand on his belt. He looked at the shattered glass, the brass bird on the floor, and Sarah standing on the landing with a crying infant. "Mrs. Mitchell, put the child down," Anderson said. He began to crack his knuckles. Pop, pop, pop. "We have a report of a kidnapping and a violent intrusion." "I'm not kidnapping anyone," Sarah cried. "This is my daughter. Evelyn tried to push me down the stairs. She's been drugging me, lying to the court." "We have the papers, Sarah," David interrupted, stepping closer to the officers. He held up a set of documents, his hands shaking. "The court granted temporary guardianship to my mother. You're not supposed to be here. You're violating a restraining order." "David, look at me," Sarah pleaded. "She tried to kill me. Tell them the truth." David looked at his mother, then at the floor. We think you need help, Sarah. We think you're not yourself." Officer Anderson moved up the stairs, his face a mask of professional skepticism. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you again. Put the baby in the bassinet and put your hands behind your back." Sarah looked at Maya, then at the cold, unyielding faces of the men in front of her. She felt the trap snap shut. She had the medical file, she had the truth. But in this house, the truth was whatever Evelyn Mitchell said it was. She slowly lowered Maya into the bassinet. As the cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, Sarah didn't look at David. She didn't look at Evelyn. She looked at the digital recorder she had slipped into her pocket before leaving the guest house, the one she used for her marketing dictation. The small red light was still glowing. It had seen everything. It had heard everything. The patrol car was cold, the vinyl seat smelling of stale tobacco and old sweat. Sarah sat in the back, her hands cuffed behind her, watching the Mitchell estate recede through the reinforced glass window. The rhythmic flashing of the police lights turned the world into a series of jagged, disconnected images. Officer Anderson sat in the front, his silhouette dark and imposing. He was typing on his laptop, the keys clicking like a swarm of insects. "Officer," Sarah said, her voice calm, "I need you to listen to something." "Save it for the station, ma'am," Anderson replied without looking back. "I have a professional digital recorder in my right pocket. I'm a marketing consultant. I record all my meetings. I had it on the whole time." Anderson paused. He looked at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes squinting as if he were trying to see through a fog. He didn't say anything, but he didn't tell her to be quiet either. "It's in my pocket," Sarah repeated. It captured the entire conversation on the landing. It captured Evelyn Mitchell admitting that she fabricated my instability to secure the family bloodline. It captured her pushing me. And it captured her saying she was going to fix the mistake David made. The car went silent. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Anderson pulled the car over to the side of the road, the gravel crunching under the wheels. He turned around, his face unreadable. "You're saying you have a recording of an assault and a confession of fraud?" "I'm saying I have the truth," Sarah said. "Something no one in that house seems to recognize. Please, just listen." Anderson reached back and pulled the small silver device from her pocket. He pressed play. The recording was clear. The wail of the alarm was a background drone, but Evelyn's voice cut through it like a razor. "I tried to protect my legacy. You're nothing. You're a footnote. You're a mistake David made, and I'm going to fix it." Then, the sound of the struggle, the grunt of effort, the sliding of feet on wood, and Sarah's gasp of terror. Anderson listened to the whole thing. He didn't crack his knuckles. He didn't ask a question. He just sat there, the small red light of the recorder reflecting in his eyes. "This changes things," he said quietly. He picked up his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 42. I need a supervisor at the Mitchell estate. We have evidence of a physical assault and possible custodial fraud. And tell them to hold off on processing the intruder report. We're heading back." The return to the estate felt different. The gates were open now, the driveway filled with more police cars and a black SUV Sarah didn't recognize. They walked into the foyer. Evelyn was standing by the fireplace, a glass of sherry in her hand, looking like the queen of a crumbling empire. David was huddled on the sofa, his head in his hands. "What is the meaning of this?" Evelyn demanded, as Anderson led Sarah back into the room. "I thought she was being processed." "There's been a development, Mrs. Mitchell," Anderson said. He held up the recorder. "We've heard the recording, all of it." Evelyn's face went pale, a stark, ghostly white that made her silver hair look like a shroud. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared at the little silver device as if it were a ticking bomb. Sarah walked over to David. She looked down at him, her heart filled not with anger, but with a profound, weary pity. "She was blackmailing you, wasn't she?" Sarah asked. "That's why you did it. The financial crime you told me about 3 years ago, the one you said was handled. She kept the evidence." David looked up, his eyes red and streaming with tears. She said if I didn't help her, she'd send me to prison. She said Maya deserved a clean father. I didn't know what else to do, Sarah. I thought I could protect you both if I just did what she said." "There is no we, David," Sarah said, her voice firm. "There is only you, and you have to choose. Right now. Are you a Mitchell, or are you a man?" David stood up. He looked at his mother, who was still frozen by the fireplace. Then he looked at the police officers. "She's lying," David said, his voice gaining strength with every word. "Everything Sarah said is true. My mother orchestrated the whole thing. She paid off the doctor, she threatened the firm, and she forced me to sign those papers. Sarah never abandoned Maya. She was forced out." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a legacy shattering. Anderson stepped forward. "Evelyn Mitchell, you're under arrest for assault and custodial interference. David Mitchell, you're coming with us for questioning regarding the fabrication of legal documents." As they led Evelyn away, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just crinkled a sugar packet between her fingers, a soft, dry rattle that sounded like the last breath of a dying snake. Sarah didn't watch them leave. She walked up the stairs, her footsteps steady and rhythmic. 1, 2, 3, 4. She reached the nursery and opened the door. The room was quiet. Maya was asleep in her bassinet, her small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. Sarah reached down and picked her up, the weight of her daughter feeling like the only real thing in the world. She walked over to the mirror. She looked at herself. The dark circles under her eyes, the scratches on her hands, the fierce, unbreakable light in her gaze. She wasn't the clumsy girl her mother had left behind. She wasn't the unstable patient Evelyn had tried to erase. She was a protector. Months later, the sun was warm on Sarah's back as she sat on a park bench in the city. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the sweet, yeasty scent of a nearby bakery. Maya was sitting on a blanket at her feet, reaching for a colorful ball, her little hands moving with a newfound confidence. Sarah watched her, a soft smile on her lips. The legal battle had been long and grueling, but the truth had been a shield that no amount of Mitchell money could pierce. Evelyn was in a minimum security facility, and David was working through a court-ordered rehabilitation program in another state. But here, in the sunlit park, none of that mattered. Sarah looked at the stairs leading down to the pond. She didn't count them. She didn't need to. She knew exactly where she was standing. She knew exactly who she was. She picked up Maya and held her close, the baby's heartbeat a steady, rhythmic drum against her own. "We're okay, Maya," she whispered. "We're finally okay." And for the first time in her life, Sarah Mitchell didn't need a number to know she was safe. She just needed the warmth of her daughter in her arms and the clear, bright horizon of a future they had reclaimed together.